Let's continue with John chapter 5, verse 1. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Just a few points here. So which feast exactly this is? Different opinions. With the Passovers, clearly it's stated it's a Passover. In this case, it's just a feast. And Jesus went up to Jerusalem. So I've mentioned it as well before in other Gospels. You don't find that Jesus going up to the feast the whole time. But it would be normal because this was like expected of the Jews to go up to the feast. And it's called the Feast of the Jews. I've already mentioned as well that people have this idea that John is like this anti-Semite because Jews are bad and etc. 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 But I think I've kind of explained already that I don't think like that. And so one needs to discern between those who are ultimately true Jews and those who are not. Okay, this is not just a New Testament concept. It was the same in the Old Testament as well. In the days of Elijah, he thought he's the only one that still believes, and Jesus said, no, there's 40,000 others as well that God left. So in other words, there were always the group of people within the nation, the Jewish nation or the Israelite nation, who were born again, and then the group who were not. And so in this case as well, this just continues with the same theme, because I've mentioned as well that John is so much looking back to the Old Testament. He's really looking a lot back to the Old Testament. So this concept of the elect coming from the Old Testament, those that God kept, is then basically something that John is using a lot. In chapter 1, he spoke about that as well, right? So when he uses therefore the terminology Jews, it's not because now he's this anti-Semite and he hates the Jews. I explained, no, he actually wrote to the leadership, right, to those in power, so as to convince them that Jesus is, well, not just God, but the true Messiah, that this Messiah is more than just a man. Okay, they expected some other great kind of Superman kind of idea, but Jesus is more than the Superman, right? He is God himself. So this is as well why he points that out, and as well why he's speaking of the Jews, and because he's using that connection. So don't make that mistake. Don't like the others did, or like the Gnostics, for example, about knowledge. Speaking of knowledge all the time, it's because they didn't know. Okay, so it's not hidden knowledge. And those who say John was an anti-Semite because he wrote and he spoke negatively about the Jews. No, because he's using back towards the Old Testament, focusing on the Old Testament concept of the elect and the non-elect. In the days of Jeremiah, people came they said, well, aren't we not bringing all these offerings? And like, why is all these things happening to us? Kind of, right? And just like, the stuff you're bringing, right? It's you're bringing the worst of the worst. That's not about, I'm looking for the heart. So that was always the thing. And that theme is because John is so much focused on especially the books of Moses, the Old Testament in general, right? Looking through that is then the connection. So please understand that correctly. And I think so many people, if not the majority of people, therefore see or mistake what wrongfully understand why John is using the term Jews and not Jews. So in this case, it's a holy day of the Jews, right? A feast of the Jews. So as a nation, right, it's their feast. Who in that nation ultimately the elect, the born of God? Chapter 3, born again. That is the question. Verse 2. Now there's in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. So I did mention in the introduction that people said that, oh no, there was never such a pool, and recently, I can't remember exactly how long ago, they did find after archaeological digging there in Jerusalem such a pool. So it is therefore, because long time the liberals used to say, the theologians, no mistake in the Bible, there was never such a pool, but actually then they did find this pool. Okay, so in Aramaic it's called Bethesda. why is it mentioned here that in Aramaic is called like this? Right? I think this is again just plain to do with the simple fact that it might have been, I'm not 100% sure understandably, it might have been to do with the fact that the people, because Jesus and because of everything that happened there, they were calling, or this pool, the Bethesda. But the locals or the people he wrote to would not have understand it, because they would have been calling it in their, maybe most likely a Greek word or something like that. Okay, so therefore, just for that sake, since it became more known for that, to explain to that when I'm speaking of this pool called Bethesda, this is actually the pool that you know under a different name. Okay, so they all exactly know where this happened. So, and as well the 5 roofed colonnades. So why would he mention the 5 roof colonnades? If it was to people, as so many scholars, if not the vast majority of scholars say, it was written out for 2 people outside, then it does not, for me, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. These are small details that would mean nothing to those people. So if a person lived out there and like, so why the heck mention as 5 colonnades? Like, why? I mean, it's not important to them. But if it's written to the people living in Jerusalem, mention of these 5 colonnades, then it makes a lot of sense to them, because they can exactly pinpoint exactly there is where this happened. And since they would have, because of what we're going to see here, they would have seen this, right? Because it led to a long discussion. So they would, like when John mentions this specific pool, they would remember as well the discussion they had with Jesus there concerning who Jesus is and his authority, and say, yes, this is exactly where this happened. We know because we were there. Okay, that is why I feel it's so important, or why John is making such a big point of exactly where this happened, so they can look back and say, yes, we did it there. It happened there. This happened in fact.